Chapter 1. The mahogany conference table stretched before Violet Clark like a battlefield, and she was winning, again. Her manicured fingers moved across the presentation slides with surgical precision, dismantling Marwood Industries' acquisition proposal piece by piece. 20 executives watched in stunned silence as she exposed every flaw, every miscalculation, and every desperate attempt to lowball her client.
Gentlemen.
Violet's voice could cut glass.
2.9 billion? For Marwood?
She let the silence stretch, watching them squirm.
My client isn't desperate.
You are.
4.2, or we're done here.
The silence that followed was deafening. Violet's pulse hammered beneath her composed exterior, adrenaline coursing through her veins like liquid fire. This was what she lived for, the moment when brilliance met strategy and emerged victorious. At 42, she was the chief strategy officer at Morrison & Associates, the most prestigious PR consulting firm on the East Coast. She'd clawed her way to the top through pure merit, building an empire from nothing but ambition and an unshakable belief in her own worth.
The Marwood CEO cleared his throat, his face flushed with defeat.
We'll need to discuss this internally.
Of course. Violet's smile was predatory perfection. My assistant will send you our timeline. 24 hours should be sufficient.
As the executives filed out, mumbling amongst themselves, Violet remained seated, savoring the victory. Helena Voss, her assistant of 8 years, approached with that knowing look in her steel-gray eyes.
Another conquest,
Ms. Clark, Helena said in her crisp German accent.
Though I notice you didn't even break a sweat.
Violet gathered her papers with practiced efficiency.
Emotion is weakness in the boardroom, Helena. You know that.
But as they walked toward the elevator, Violet caught her reflection in the polished chrome doors. Designer suit molded perfectly to her curves, hair pulled into a flawless chignon, makeup applied with artistic precision. She looked like success incarnate.
So why did she feel so hollow? The elevator doors closed, sealing them in silence as they ascended to the 47th floor.
Violet's penthouse office overlooked the Manhattan skyline, a constant reminder of how far she'd climbed. But tonight, the view felt more like a prison than a throne.
Helena, Violet said suddenly, her voice softer than usual. Cancel my dinner with the Morrison partners. I need some time to think. Helena's eyebrows rose slightly.
In 8 years, Violet Clark had never canceled a business dinner.
Of course. Shall I reschedule for tomorrow? I'll let you know. Alone in her office, Violet finally allowed her mask to slip. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, pressing her palms against the cool glass.
The city sparkled below her like scattered diamonds, millions of people living, loving, connecting. And here she stood, 42 years old and utterly alone. The truth she'd never spoken aloud echoed in her mind: she was tired.
Tired of being the strongest person in every room.
Tired of men who either cowered before her success or tried to diminish it. Tired of dating apps filled with boys masquerading as men, seeking sugar mamas or arm candy to boost their fragile egos. She wanted someone who could handle her strength without being threatened by it. Someone who would see the woman beneath the executive armor and love both versions of her. Someone who would make her feel feminine and protected while still respecting her power. But those men seemed to exist only in fantasy. Violet's phone buzzed.
A text from her best friend Addison: wine tonight?
You sound stressed in your voicemails. She started to type a response, then deleted it.
Started again, then stopped. How could she explain this ache that lived beneath her ribs? This desperate longing for someone to truly see her?
Instead, she gathered her things and headed home to her empty penthouse apartment, unaware that across town, a man was about to turn her carefully ordered world upside down. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our Dear Love Diaries family. Your special place in this community of heartfelt stories is waiting for you. These passionate journeys of souls connecting against all odds have brought together thousands of beautiful hearts just like yours. Make sure you hit the bell too, so you'll know immediately when a new story unfolds in our diary of love. 3 hours later, Violet stood in her marble bathroom, gripping the sink until her knuckles went white. The woman staring back from the mirror was immaculate as always, skin glowing from her expensive skincare routine, body maintained through disciplined workouts, mind sharp as a blade. But her dark eyes held a weariness that no amount of success could cure. 42 and still waiting for someone to see me as a woman, not just a threat, she whispered to her reflection. She had no idea that in 48 hours, a man 5 years younger would make her forget every rule she'd ever made about love. A man who would challenge everything she thought she knew about desire, protection, and the courage it takes to surrender to something bigger than yourself. But for now, she was alone with her victories and her yearning, completely unaware that across town, Griffin Hammond was staring at his reflection, wondering why success felt so empty when you had no one to share it with. The Meridian Conference Center hummed with the energy of 500 of the city's most powerful executives. Violet Clark moved through the crowd like a force of nature, her burgundy silk dress commanding attention without demanding it. She'd chosen the color deliberately, bold enough to stand out, sophisticated enough to be taken seriously. At 42, she'd learned that every choice in her appearance was a strategic decision. Violet. James Morrison, the senior partner of her firm, intercepted her path to the main auditorium.
Brilliant work on the Marwood account yesterday.
I heard they accepted our counter-proposal this morning.
Of course they did. Violet's smile was confident without being arrogant. They couldn't afford not to. That's why you're the best in the business. Morrison's pride was genuine. Have you reviewed your speaking notes for the panel? You're up against some heavy hitters today. Violet's pulse quickened slightly.
The panel discussion on disruptive innovation in crisis management would pit her against 3 other industry leaders, including someone she'd only heard about in whispers, Griffin Hammond. The 37-year-old tech billionaire who'd built his empire from nothing, whose strategies were as unconventional as they were effective. I'm ready, she said simply. 20 minutes later, Violet sat on the stage, her posture perfect, her attention focused on the moderator's introduction. But her awareness sharpened when the 4th panelist was announced. Please welcome Griffin Hammond, founder and CEO of Hammond Innovations, whose revolutionary software platform has disrupted 3 major industries in the past decade. Violet turned with polite interest, then felt her breath catch. Griffin Hammond was not what she'd expected. Tall and lean, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it and gray eyes that seemed to see everything. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, but he wore it with an ease that suggested he was equally comfortable in jeans. There was something quietly powerful about him, a confidence that didn't need to announce itself. Their eyes met as he took his seat beside her, and Violet felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. He smiled, not the practiced smile of business networking, but something warmer, more genuine. Miss Clark, he said, his voice low and rich. I've heard impressive things about your work.
Mr. Hammond.
Her response was cooler than she felt.
Likewise.
The moderator began with standard questions about market trends and innovation cycles. Violet delivered her responses with practiced brilliance, but she was hyper-aware of Griffin's presence beside her. His cologne was subtle but intoxicating, something woody and clean that made her want to lean closer.
Then the real battle began. Ms.
Clark, the moderator said, you've built your reputation on traditional crisis management strategies.
How do you respond to critics who say your methods are becoming outdated in our rapidly evolving digital landscape?
It was a loaded question, clearly designed to pit her against Griffin's tech-forward approach.
Violet's smile sharpened. She lived for moments like this. Traditional doesn't mean outdated, she replied, her voice carrying easily through the auditorium.
My methods work because they're based on understanding human psychology, not just market algorithms. When a company faces a crisis, their customers aren't responding to data points, they're responding to emotions, trust, and authenticity. Those fundamentals never change, regardless of the platform. A murmur of approval rippled through the audience, but Griffin leaned forward slightly.
With respect, Ms.
Clark, he said, and the way he said her name made something flutter in her stomach. Understanding psychology is exactly why traditional approaches often fail.
Human behavior is evolving as rapidly as technology. The trust mechanisms that worked 5 years ago are obsolete.
Modern crisis management requires adaptive strategies that can pivot in real time. The challenge in his voice was unmistakable, but there was something else, a spark of intellectual excitement, as if he was genuinely enjoying their sparring match. Violet felt her competitive fire ignite.
Adaptive strategies are simply reactive panic disguised as innovation.
Real crisis management is about prevention and preparation, building foundations strong enough to weather any storm. Your approach treats symptoms while ignoring the disease. Preparation is crucial, Griffin conceded, his gray eyes never leaving hers, but so is recognizing when your preparations are insufficient. The most successful companies I've worked with are the ones brave enough to abandon failing strategies and embrace uncertainty.
Sometimes destruction is the only path to evolution. The audience was completely silent now, sensing the intensity crackling between them.
Violet felt her pulse racing, adrenaline coursing through her veins.
When was the last time someone had challenged her this intelligently, this fearlessly?
Destruction may be your speciality, Mr. Hammond, she said, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper, but I prefer precision. Surgical strikes that preserve value while eliminating problems. It's the difference between an artist and a demolition crew.
Griffin's smile was slow and devastating. Then perhaps we should discuss what happens when art meets innovation.
I'd be very interested in your perspective. The double meaning in his words was unmistakable, and Violet felt heat flood her cheeks. The moderator, clearly sensing the tension, quickly moved to other panelists, but Violet couldn't concentrate on their responses. Every cell in her body was attuned to Griffin Hammond. When the panel ended, Violet stood quickly, needing distance from the magnetic pull she felt toward him. But as she stepped down from the stage, his voice stopped her.
Ms. Clark.
She turned, her professional mask firmly in place.
Mr. Hammond.
He was closer now, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, close enough to smell that intoxicating cologne again.
I meant what I said about being interested in your perspective. Would you consider continuing our conversation over dinner?
The request was professional on the surface, but the way he was looking at her was anything but.
Violet felt her carefully constructed walls trembling.
I don't think that would be appropriate, she said, though every instinct screamed at her to say yes.
Because we disagreed on strategy?
His smile was gentle now, understanding. The best ideas come from challenging conventional wisdom. Besides, he leaned slightly closer, his voice dropping, I have a feeling we agree on more than we think. Before Violet could respond, Helena appeared at her elbow with perfect timing.
Ms. Clark, your car is waiting.
Of course. Violet gathered herself, extending her hand to Griffin in a brisk handshake.
Mr. Hammond, it's been illuminating.
His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and he held the contact just a beat longer than necessary.
The pleasure was entirely mine.
I hope we have the opportunity to continue this conversation soon. As Violet walked away, she could feel his eyes following her, and it took every ounce of self-control not to look back. In the car, Helena studied her with knowing eyes.
Interesting panel discussion, Helena said carefully. It was adequately challenging, Violet replied, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. Mr.
Hammond seemed particularly engaged.
Violet stared out the window at the passing city. He's young.
37 isn't exactly a child, Ms. Clark.
5 years younger than me. Helena's smile was almost maternal. And since when has age ever intimidated you? Since never, Violet thought.
But something about Griffin Hammond terrified her in ways that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with the way he'd looked at her, like he could see straight through her professional armor to the woman underneath. That evening, Violet tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to the panel discussion. The way Griffin had challenged her, not to diminish her intelligence but to engage with it. The way his eyes had lit up when she pushed back. The way he'd said her name like it was something precious. She was still thinking about him when her phone buzzed with an email from an unknown address.
Her pulse quickened when she saw the name, Griffin Hammond. M.S.
Clark. Our conversation today reminded me why I love what I do. It's rare to meet someone who challenges my thinking so eloquently. I hope you'll reconsider dinner, not as a business meeting, but as a chance for two people who clearly enjoy intellectual sparring to continue the match on more neutral ground.
I promise to keep the demolition crew at bay. Griffin. P.S. I've never met a woman who could make destroying someone look so elegant.
Violet stared at the message, her heart hammering against her ribs.
The last line made her breath catch. Had he really just turned her victory into a compliment? And why did the thought of seeing him again make her feel like a teenager with her first crush?
She started to type a response 3 times, deleting each attempt. Finally, she closed her laptop without responding, but Griffin Hammond's words echoed in her mind long into the night.
Have you ever had someone look at you like you were the only person in the room? That moment when everything else just disappears? Share that feeling in the comments.
Across town, Griffin Hammond stared at his phone, waiting for a response that never came. But he wasn't discouraged. Violet Clark was worth the wait, worth the chase, worth whatever it took to prove that some connections transcended conventional wisdom. He'd seen the flicker of awareness in her dark eyes, felt the electric current when their hands touched. She was fighting the attraction, but she felt it too. And Griffin Hammond had built an empire by pursuing impossible goals with unwavering patience. Tomorrow, he would begin the most important campaign of his life, winning the heart of a woman who had every reason to run from him and every reason to stay.
The game was just beginning. Chapter 2.
Violet had rewritten the Bancroft proposal twice, deleted 12 texts to him, and caught herself staring at her phone during a client call. "You're distracted," Helena said, setting down coffee with surgical precision.
"This isn't you."
"I'm fine," Violet said automatically, then sighed.
"No, I'm not fine. I'm being ridiculous." "About Mr. Hammond?"
Violet's head snapped up.
"How did you?"
"You've checked your phone 6 times in the past hour, and you've never been one for social media."
Helena's smile was gentle but knowing.
"Also, his assistant called yesterday to ask about your coffee preferences."
"He what?" Heat flooded Violet's cheeks.
"Apparently, he has a meeting scheduled in your building today and wanted to ensure he brought the right peace offering." Before Violet could respond, her office door opened and Griffin Hammond walked in, carrying 2 cups from her favorite coffee shop, a place so exclusive it required a membership.
Her breath caught.
He looked devastatingly handsome in a navy suit that emphasized his lean frame, his dark hair slightly mussed as if he'd been running his fingers through it. "Miss Clark," he said, his voice warm with amusement. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion."
"Your assistant mentioned you might need caffeine intervention." Helena smiled innocently. "I'll be at my desk if you need anything."
She disappeared, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Violet stood slowly, trying to regain her composure.
"Mr. Hammond, this is highly irregular."
"Griffin," he corrected, moving closer.
"And I prefer to think of it as persistent."
He held out one of the coffee cups.
"Double-shot cappuccino with oat milk and a touch of vanilla." "I'm told it's your weakness."
The fact that he'd taken the time to learn her coffee order should have annoyed her. Instead, it made something warm unfurl in her chest.
"You're very well informed." "I'm thorough when something matters to me."
His gray eyes held hers steadily.
"You matter to me, Violet."
The use of her first name, combined with the sincerity in his voice, made her knees weak. She accepted the coffee, careful not to let their fingers touch, but he stepped closer anyway. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper.
"You don't even know me." "I know you're brilliant."
His voice dropped. "I know you're passionate about your work, and I know that smile, the real one, not the boardroom version, it completely undoes me." Violet's hand trembled slightly around the coffee cup.
"Griffin."
"I also know you're scared of me," he continued, his voice gentle but relentless. "Not of me personally, but of what you feel when I'm near you."
"I can see it in your eyes, Violet. The same fire I feel every time I look at you."
"You don't understand," she said, turning away from the intensity of his gaze.
"This is complicated." "Because I'm younger than you?"
When she didn't respond, he moved to stand beside her at the window, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body.
Age is just numbers, Violet. Chemistry is forever.
She turned to face him, and the hunger in his eyes nearly undid her.
You should be with someone your own age. Someone who what?
His voice was fierce now, passionate.
Someone who doesn't challenge me intellectually? Someone who needs me to be smaller so she can feel bigger? Someone who sees my success as a threat instead of an accomplishment to celebrate?
His words hit her like a physical blow. Every failed relationship she'd endured had followed that pattern, men who either felt diminished by her success or tried to use her for it. I don't want a girl, Violet, Griffin continued, his voice dropping to a whisper.
I want a queen.
I want someone whose strength makes me stronger, whose intelligence pushes me to be better.
I want you.
The raw honesty in his voice broke something open inside her chest. She set down her coffee with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the intensity of her response to him. I need some air, she whispered, moving toward the door. Violet, wait. His voice stopped her, but she didn't turn around.
Have dinner with me. Not business. Just us.
She stood frozen, her hand on the door handle. Every rational thought screamed at her to say no, to maintain her professional boundaries, to protect herself from the chaos he represented. But when she turned to face him, the hope in his eyes undid her completely. One dinner, she heard herself say.
But this doesn't mean.
It means you're giving us a chance, he said softly.
That's all I need. That evening, Violet changed clothes 4 times before settling on a black wrap dress that was elegant without being overly formal.
She told herself it was just dinner, just conversation between 2 professionals.
But her racing pulse suggested otherwise.
The restaurant Griffin had chosen was intimate without being presumptuous, a quiet corner booth in an upscale lounge where conversation could flow freely. When she arrived, he was already there, standing to greet her with that devastating smile. You look stunning, he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her cheeks warm.
Thank you.
She slid into the booth, hyper-aware of his presence across from her.
This place is lovely.
I thought you might appreciate somewhere we could actually talk without half the city's business elite listening in. He poured wine from the bottle he'd already ordered, a vintage she recognized as prohibitively expensive. I hope you don't mind that I took the liberty. It's perfect, she admitted, taking a sip. The wine was smooth, warming her from the inside out, or maybe that was just Griffin's effect on her. For the first hour, they kept the conversation safely professional, discussing industry trends, sharing war stories from difficult clients, debating the future of crisis management. But gradually, inevitably, the barriers began to lower. Tell me something real about yourself, Griffin said suddenly, his gray eyes intense in the dim lighting.
Something that isn't in your corporate bio.
Violet hesitated, then found herself speaking before she could stop herself. I wanted to be a teacher when I was young.
Elementary school.
I loved the idea of shaping young minds, helping children discover their potential.
What changed?
Reality, she said with a bitter laugh. My father made it clear that teaching wasn't a real career for someone with my intelligence. He pushed me toward business, toward success that could be measured in dollars and power.
Griffin leaned forward, his expression serious. Do you regret it?
The question caught her off guard.
No one had ever asked her that before. I don't know. I'm good at what I do. I've built something meaningful. But do you love it? Violet stared into her wine, shaken by the honesty his question demanded. I love winning.
I love the challenge, the strategy, the moment when everything clicks into place.
But sometimes.
She trailed off, afraid to voice the thought that had been haunting her.
Sometimes?
Sometimes I wonder if I've built such strong walls around myself that I've forgotten how to let anyone in. The words tumbled out before she could stop them, and she immediately felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that terrified her. Griffin reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. The contact sent electricity shooting up her arm.
Maybe the right person isn't trying to break down your walls, Violet. Maybe he's waiting for you to open the door. Her breath caught.
The way he was looking at her, like she was the most fascinating woman in the world, made her feel things she'd forgotten she was capable of feeling. "I'm tired of being the strong one," she whispered, the confession torn from somewhere deep inside her. "I want someone who makes me feel like a woman, not a competitor. Someone who isn't intimidated by my success but isn't trying to use it either. Someone who..." She stopped, horrified by how much she'd revealed. "Someone who what?" Griffin's voice was gentle, encouraging. "Someone who makes me want to be soft," she finished, her voice barely audible. "Who makes me feel protected instead of always being the protector." Griffin's hand covered hers completely, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her skin. "You make me want to be the man who protects your heart, not your equal in some corporate war. You make me want to be worthy of your trust." The sincerity in his voice, the way he was looking at her like she hung the moon, made tears prick at her eyes. When was the last time someone had seen her as a woman first, a force of nature second? "Griffin," she started, but he shook his head. "I know what you're going to say. I'm too young, too different, too risky. But I'm not going anywhere, Violet. I'm not intimidated by your strength, I'm awed by it. I'm not threatened by your success, I want to celebrate it with you. And I'm definitely not interested in anyone younger or easier or safer." "How can you be so sure?" The question came out as a plea. "You barely know me." His thumb continued its gentle movement across her knuckles, and the simple touch was driving her to distraction. "I know that you take your coffee with oat milk because you care about your health, but add vanilla because life should have sweetness. I know that you wear your power like armor because you've had to fight for every inch of respect you've earned. I know that when you laugh, really laugh, you cover your mouth like you're surprised by your own joy." Violet stared at him, stunned by how much he'd observed, how deeply he'd already seen her. "I know that you're afraid of needing someone," he continued, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. "Because everyone you've ever needed has either tried to diminish you or use you. But I don't want to diminish you, Violet. I want to worship you. I don't want to use you, I want to support you. I want to be the safe place you come home to at the end of the day." A tear escaped before she could stop it, rolling down her cheek. Griffin released her hand to gently wipe it away, his touch so tender it nearly broke her. "I've never needed someone like this before," she whispered, the admission terrifying in its honesty. "It scares me." "Good," he said softly. "It scares me too. The best things in life should be a little terrifying." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of confession hanging between them. Violet felt exposed, raw, more vulnerable than she'd been in years. But instead of wanting to run, she found herself leaning into the feeling, into him. "I should go," she said finally, though she made no move to leave. "Should," Griffin agreed, but his eyes held hers captive. "But do you want to?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and promise. Violet's rational mind screamed at her to leave, to protect herself, to maintain her carefully constructed boundaries. But her heart whispered something entirely different. "No," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to go." Griffin's smile was slow and devastating, full of masculine satisfaction and tender promise. "Then stay. Just a little longer." As the evening deepened around them, Violet found herself sharing stories she'd never told anyone, her fears about aging alone, her struggles to find men who could handle her success, her deep-seated longing to be cherished for who she was beneath the executive exterior. Griffin listened to every word with an intensity that made her feel like the most important person in the world. When he walked her to her car, the city lights reflected in his eyes, and Violet knew with bone-deep certainty that her carefully ordered life was about to change forever. The only question was whether she was brave enough to let it happen. "Violet," Griffin said as she reached for her car door. His voice stopped her, made her turn back to face him. "Yes?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, smell that intoxicating cologne that was becoming dangerously familiar. "I'm going to pursue you. Relentlessly, respectfully, but relentlessly. And I never lose." The promise in his voice sent heat flooding through her veins. "Griffin. I know you're scared.
I know this seems complicated.
But sometimes the best things in life require a leap of faith. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing across her skin in a touch so gentle it nearly undid her.
Jump with me, Violet. I promise I'll catch you.
Before she could respond, before she could talk herself out of it, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, but the moment their mouths connected, fire exploded between them. Griffin's arms came around her, pulling her closer, and Violet melted into his strength, into the promise of protection and passion she'd been craving her entire life. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Griffin rested his forehead against hers. That was either the beginning of something beautiful, he whispered, or the most exquisite torture of my life. Violet's heart hammered against her ribs.
I don't know how to do this, Griffin. I don't know how to be vulnerable.
Then let me teach you, he said softly. Let me show you what it feels like to be cherished. As Violet drove home that night, her lips still tingling from his kiss, she knew there was no going back. Griffin Hammond had awakened something in her that had been sleeping for far too long, the part of her that was purely, completely woman. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring.
Have you ever had someone challenge you intellectually while making your heart race? That electric moment when minds clash and souls connect? Share your story in the comments below. If you're loving Violet and Griffin's story, hit that like button.
Subscribe to Dear Love Diaries for passionate stories that prove love conquers all.
Chapter 3.
The next morning, Violet woke with Griffin's kiss still burning on her lips and panic clawing at her throat. In the harsh light of day, her behavior seemed reckless, unprofessional, completely unlike the controlled woman she'd spent decades becoming.
She'd kissed a man 5 years younger, a potential business contact, in a public parking lot like some desperate teenager.
But even as her rational mind catalogued all the reasons their connection was impossible, her body betrayed her with the memory of his touch, the way he'd held her like she was something precious. She arrived at the office an hour early, hoping to lose herself in work, but Helena was already there with coffee and a knowing smile.
Good evening last night, I assume? Helena asked, setting the cup on Violet's desk.
It was a business dinner, Violet said automatically, then caught Helena's expression.
What? You're glowing, Ms. Clark.
And you've checked your reflection 3 times since walking in. Before Violet could respond, Helena's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at Violet with barely contained amusement.
Mr. Hammond's office.
He'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss potential synergies between your companies.
Shall I tell them you're available? Violet's pulse jumped. Did he say what kind of synergies? The kind that require several very long, very private meetings, I'd imagine. Heat flooded Violet's cheeks. Helena!
I'm simply observing that the man seems quite determined.
His assistant mentioned he's cleared his entire afternoon schedule for whenever you're available.
Violet tried to focus on her work, but every few minutes she found herself staring at her phone, wondering if Griffin would call, text, or simply appear in her office again with coffee and that devastating smile. The uncertainty was driving her mad. At 11:30, her concentration was shattered by a delivery, an enormous arrangement of white orchids, elegant and sophisticated, nothing like the roses most men scent.
The card was simple: thank you for last night. Gee.
Violet stared at the flowers, her heart hammering. White orchids symbolize strength and luxury, but also pure, mature love.
Had he chosen them deliberately, or was she reading too much into a simple gesture?
Someone has excellent taste, Helena observed, reading over her shoulder. And clearly understands the language of flowers.
It's just a thank you gift, Violet said weakly.
Of course it is. Just like the coffee delivery that just arrived is probably a coincidence.
What coffee delivery? Helena smiled. The one from Cafe Luna with a note requesting they deliver your usual order every morning for the next month. Paid in advance. Violet's breath caught.
He was taking care of her in small, thoughtful ways that spoke to who she was beneath the executive exterior.
When was the last time someone had anticipated her needs like this?
Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I hope you like the orchids. They reminded me of you, elegant, strong, and absolutely beautiful.
Griffin.
Before she could stop herself, she was texting back, "They're lovely."
Thank you.
His response came immediately, "Have dinner with me tonight. Please." Violet stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Every rational thought told her to decline, to put distance between them before this attraction consumed her completely. But the memory of how he'd looked at her last night, like she was the most fascinating woman alive, made her resolution crumble.
I can't. Prior engagement. Tomorrow then. I'm patient, but I'm not giving up.
The determination in his words sent heat spiraling through her. Griffin Hammond was pursuing her with a single-minded focus that was both thrilling and terrifying. No man had ever wanted her this intensely, this completely. "Why me, Griffin?" she typed before she could stop herself.
"Because you're extraordinary. Because you challenge me.
Because when you smile, really smile, it's like watching the sun break through storm clouds.
Because I can't stop thinking about you."
Violet pressed the phone to her chest, overwhelmed by the poetry in his words. Men her age sent practical texts about scheduling and logistics. Griffin Hammond sent her prose that made her feel like a heroine in a romance novel. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. Griffin's name appeared on the screen, and her pulse raced.
"Violet."
His voice was warm, intimate, like a caress through the phone.
"I needed to hear your voice."
"Griffin," she breathed, then caught herself. "This is highly irregular.
You can't just call me in the middle of the workday."
"I can't concentrate," he admitted, his voice rough with honesty.
"I keep thinking about last night, about the way you felt in my arms. About the way you kissed me like you were starving for it."
Heat flooded her cheeks, her body responding immediately to the hunger in his voice.
"Griffin.
Have dinner with me tonight," he said again, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. "Let me take care of you. Let me show you what it feels like to be cherished." The words were a direct hit to every hidden longing in her heart.
How did he know exactly what she needed to hear?
"I told you, I have plans."
"Cancel them."
The command in his voice should have irritated her. Instead, it sent electricity shooting straight to her core. Griffin Hammond wasn't asking for her time, he was claiming it, with a confidence that suggested he knew exactly how much she wanted to say yes.
"I can't just cancel. You can do anything you want, Violet. You're the most powerful woman I know.
Cancel whatever it is and have dinner with me.
Let me feed you, let me talk to you, let me earn the right to kiss you again."
Violet closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the intensity of her desire to do exactly what he was asking. When was the last time she'd wanted something, someone, something this desperately? "One dinner," she heard herself say.
"But Griffin." "Yes? This doesn't mean I'm agreeing to anything more than dinner."
His laugh was low and rich, full of masculine confidence.
"We'll see about that."
That evening, Violet found herself in Griffin's car, a sleek Tesla that was both environmentally conscious and undeniably luxurious, heading toward a destination he'd refused to reveal. "Where are we going?" she asked, hyper-aware of his presence beside her, the way his hands moved confidently on the steering wheel, the subtle scent of his cologne filling the enclosed space. "Somewhere we can talk without interruption," he said, glancing at her with those devastating gray eyes.
"Somewhere you can relax."
20 minutes later, they pulled into the driveway of a stunning contemporary house overlooking the water. Violet's breath caught as she took in the clean lines, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the way the building seemed to emerge organically from the landscape. "This is yours?" she asked.
"Home," Griffin confirmed, coming around to open her door.
"I thought you might appreciate somewhere truly private." As he led her up the walkway, Violet felt a flutter of nervousness. Being alone with Griffin in a restaurant was one thing, being alone with him in his home was something else entirely. The intimacy of the setting, the way he'd planned this so carefully, suggested intentions that both thrilled and terrified her. The interior was as stunning as the exterior, minimalist but warm, with natural materials and carefully chosen art that spoke to refined taste and genuine appreciation for beauty. "It's beautiful," she said softly.
Thank you. I designed it myself.
He helped her out of her coat, his fingers brushing her shoulders in the process. The simple touch sent awareness racing through her.
Wine. Please. As Griffin moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, Violet studied the space around her.
Everything spoke to success and sophistication, but also to someone who valued comfort and authenticity over showiness. The bookshelves were filled with everything from business texts to poetry. The art was clearly chosen for personal meaning rather than investment value.
You really did build all this yourself, she said, accepting the glass of wine he offered.
From nothing, he confirmed, leading her to the living room where floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a breathtaking view of the water.
Foster care doesn't exactly set you up for success, but it teaches you that the only person you can truly depend on is yourself. The casual mention of his difficult childhood made Violet's chest tighten. How old were you when you lost your parents?
8. Griffin settled beside her on the sofa, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not so close as to crowd her.
Car accident. No other family, so into the system I went. That must have been terrifying.
It was. His voice was matter-of-fact, but she could hear the echo of old pain.
But it also taught me to value loyalty, to appreciate genuine connection and authenticity when I find it.
The way he was looking at her suggested he saw that authenticity in her, and the thought made her pulse race.
Is that why you're so?
She searched for the right word, persistent?
Griffin's smile was slow and devastating.
When you've spent your childhood learning that people leave, and your adult life building something meaningful from nothing, you develop a very clear sense of what's worth fighting for. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining with gentle pressure.
You're worth fighting for, Violet.
The sincerity in his voice nearly undid her. She looked down at their joined hands, marveling at how perfectly they fit together, how right it felt to let him touch her this way.
I don't understand what you see in me, she whispered.
I'm difficult, demanding, set in my ways.
I'm older than you, probably more cynical about love than anyone you've ever met.
Griffin lifted their joined hands to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles that made her breath catch. I see a woman who's built an empire through sheer force of will and brilliance. I see someone who's strong enough to stand alone but brave enough to risk connection.
I see the most beautiful woman I've ever encountered, inside and out.
Griffin. I see someone who's been hurt by men who couldn't handle her strength, who's learned to protect herself by keeping everyone at arm's length. But I also see someone who's aching to be loved for exactly who she is. His thumb traced across her knuckles, the gentle touch sending electricity up her arm. I want to be the man who loves you exactly as you are, Violet. Strong, brilliant, demanding, difficult, all of it. Tears pricked at her eyes. How did he see her so clearly? How did he know exactly what her heart needed to hear? I'm scared, she admitted, the words barely audible.
I've never felt anything this intense before.
It terrifies me. Good, Griffin said softly, shifting closer on the sofa.
The best things in life should terrify you a little. They should make you feel alive, make you want to be braver than you thought possible.
His free hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. The touch was so gentle, so reverent, that more tears followed. I don't know how to do this, she whispered.
I don't know how to be vulnerable with someone.
Then let me teach you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Let me show you what it feels like to be treasured, to be protected, to be loved exactly as you are. Before she could overthink it, before fear could stop her, Violet leaned into his touch, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that was soft at first, tentative, but quickly deepened as years of loneliness and longing poured out between them. Griffin's arms came around her, pulling her closer, and Violet melted into his strength, into the promise of everything she'd been afraid to want. His kiss was patient but passionate, reverent but hungry, and it awakened parts of her that had been dormant for far too long. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Griffin rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered, his voice rough with want. Not for anything you're not ready for, but just stay. Let me hold you. Let me take care of you. Violet's rational mind flashed warnings, but her heart whispered yes. For once in her life, she wanted to follow her heart instead of her head.
Okay, she breathed, and Griffin's smile was radiant with joy and promise.
As they settled back on the sofa, Violet curled against Griffin's side, feeling safer and more cherished than she had in years. Outside, the city lights reflected on the water like scattered diamonds, but inside, wrapped in Griffin's arms, Violet felt like she'd finally found her way home.
Chapter 4.
The next few weeks passed in a haze of stolen moments and building tension. Griffin was relentless in his pursuit, but never overwhelming. Flowers appeared on her desk with thoughtful notes, coffee arrived precisely when she needed it most, and text messages throughout the day that made her smile despite herself. He was everywhere and nowhere, a constant presence in her thoughts even when he wasn't physically near. Violet found herself checking her reflection more often, choosing outfits with him in mind, living for the moments when his name appeared on her phone. "You're different," Addison observed over lunch, studying Violet with the keen eye of a relationship counselor.
"Softer somehow. Happier."
Violet tried to maintain her composure, but her best friend's scrutiny was unnerving.
"I'm the same as always." "No, you're not."
Addison leaned forward, her dark eyes concerned.
"You're glowing, V. You're checking your phone every 5 minutes, and you actually laughed at my terrible joke about the waiter. What's going on?"
Before Violet could deflect, her phone buzzed with a text from Griffin, "Thinking of you.
Hope your lunch is as beautiful as you are."
The smile that spread across her face was immediate and radiant, and Addison's eyes widened with understanding.
"Oh my God," Addison breathed. "You're seeing someone. Who is he? Do I know him?"
"It's complicated," Violet said weakly.
"Everything's complicated with you. Just tell me, is he good to you? Does he make you happy?" The simple questions hit Violet like a physical blow.
Griffin made her happier than she'd been in years, but admitting that meant acknowledging how serious this was becoming.
"Yes," she whispered. "He makes me very happy." "Then what's the problem?"
Violet hesitated, then decided her best friend deserved the truth.
"He's younger than me. Significantly younger." Addison's eyebrows rose. "How much younger?"
5 years.
"That's it?" Addison laughed. "V, I thought you were going to say he was 25 or something." 5 years is nothing."
"It feels like everything," Violet said miserably.
"I'm 42, Addison."
"I'm established, set in my ways, possibly too cynical for someone who still has his whole life ahead of him."
"Or maybe you're exactly what he needs," Addison said gently.
"Maybe he's smart enough to appreciate a woman who knows who she is and what she wants."
"Maybe age isn't the issue here, maybe the issue is that you're scared of being happy." The words hit too close to home, and Violet looked away. It's not that simple. Love never is. But running from it because it doesn't fit your predetermined criteria is just another way of hiding.
Addison reached across the table, covering Violet's hand with hers. "You've spent your whole life being strong, being in control.
Maybe it's time to let someone else be strong for you."
That afternoon, Violet returned to the office to find chaos. Her assistant was on the phone, her face pale with stress, and Helena rushed to intercept her.
"Ms. Clark, we have a problem. Bancroft Industries is pulling out of the merger. They're claiming breach of confidentiality and threatening to sue for damages." Violet's blood ran cold.
The Bancroft merger was the biggest deal of her career, worth millions to the firm and her professional reputation.
"What kind of breach?" "Someone leaked details of their acquisition strategy to the press.
They're saying it came from our office."
"That's impossible. Only 5 people had access to that information. Nevertheless, they're pulling out and taking their business to Marwood and Associates."
Violet felt the world tilting beneath her feet. Marwood and Associates was run by Finn Sullivan, her former colleague and persistent suitor.
The timing was too convenient to be coincidental.
"Get Finn Sullivan on the phone," she said grimly.
"Now."
20 minutes later, Violet was staring across her desk at Finn Sullivan, his perfectly groomed appearance and smug expression making her skin crawl. He was everything she'd once thought she wanted in a partner: successful, age-appropriate, conventionally attractive. Now, looking at him, she wondered how she'd ever considered him appealing. "Violet," Finn said smoothly, settling into the chair across from her. "You look tired. This business with Bancroft must be devastating." "Cut the bullshit, Finn. Did you sabotage my deal?" His smile was cold and calculating. "I don't know what you're implying, but Marwood and Associates would never engage in unethical practices. If Bancroft chose to bring their business to us, it's because they recognize superior service when they see it." "Superior service," Violet repeated flatly. "Is that what you call industrial espionage?" "I call it smart business." Finn leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "You're getting sloppy, Violet. Distracted. Word is you're involved with some younger man who's clouding your judgment." Heat flooded Violet's cheeks, but she kept her voice level. "My personal life is none of your concern." "It is when it affects your professional performance." Finn's voice turned persuasive, almost gentle. "Come on, V. We both know this boy toy thing is just a midlife crisis. You're too smart, too sophisticated for some kid who doesn't understand what you need." "And you do?" "I understand you." Finn stood, moving around the desk until he was standing too close, invading her personal space. "I understand your ambition, your drive, your need for intellectual equality. I can give you everything you want: partnership, respect, a future that makes sense." Violet stood as well, putting distance between them. "What you can give me is a way out of my office. Think about it, Violet. Really think. What happens when this boy gets tired of playing with an older woman? What happens when he realizes he wants someone his own age, someone who can give him children, someone without all your baggage?" The words hit her like physical blows, voicing every fear she'd been trying to suppress. Finn saw her flinch and pressed his advantage. "I'm offering you stability, Violet. A real partnership with someone who appreciates everything you are. Don't throw away your career for some fantasy that's doomed to fail." After Finn left, Violet sat alone in her office, his words echoing in her mind. What if he was right? What if this thing with Griffin was just a midlife crisis, a desperate grab for youth and passion that would ultimately destroy her? Her phone buzzed with a text from Griffin. "Rough day? I'm here if you need me." The simple message, the way he always seemed to sense when she needed support, made tears prick at her eyes. But Finn's words haunted her. What if Griffin did get tired of her? What if she was setting herself up for the most devastating heartbreak of her life? By 7 o'clock, Violet was exhausted, emotionally drained, and questioning every decision she'd made in the past month. When Griffin appeared in her doorway, still devastatingly handsome in his dark suit, she felt her carefully constructed walls trembling. "Violet," he said softly, taking in her pale face and the tension in her shoulders. "What happened?" The gentle concern in his voice nearly broke her. "Bad day. Lost a major client." Griffin stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. "I'm sorry. Do you want to talk about it?" "No," she said quickly, then caught herself. "Yes. Maybe. I don't know." He moved closer, his presence immediately comforting and unsettling in equal measure. "What can I do?" The simple question, the assumption that he would do anything to help her, made something crack open in her chest. When was the last time someone had asked that question without expecting something in return? "I don't know," she whispered, and then suddenly she was crying, ugly, desperate sobs that she couldn't control. All the stress of the day, all her fears about their relationship, all the loneliness she'd carried for so long came pouring out in a torrent of emotion. Griffin was there instantly, gathering her into his arms, holding her against his chest while she fell apart. He didn't ask questions, didn't try to fix anything, he just held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring soft words of comfort. "I've got you," he whispered against her hair. "You're safe. I've got you." Violet clung to him, overwhelmed by how good it felt to let someone else be strong for her, to let herself be vulnerable and protected.
When the tears finally subsided, she pulled back slightly, embarrassed by her breakdown.
I'm sorry, she said, wiping her eyes.
That was completely unprofessional. Violet.
Griffin's hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes.
Don't apologize for being human.
Don't apologize for trusting me enough to let me see you fall apart. I don't fall apart, she said weakly.
I'm the strong one. I solve problems, I don't create them.
Everyone falls apart sometimes.
Even queens need someone to catch them when they fall.
The tenderness in his voice, the way he was looking at her like she was something precious, made fresh tears threaten. Take me home, she whispered.
Please. I can't be here anymore. Griffin didn't ask which home she meant.
He simply gathered her things, led her to his car, and drove them to his house overlooking the water. Violet was grateful for his silence, for the way he seemed to understand that she needed time to process everything that had happened. Once inside, Griffin poured her a glass of wine and led her to the sofa where they'd shared their first real kiss. The memory of that night, the hope and possibility it had represented, made her chest ache. Tell me what happened today, Griffin said gently, settling beside her. Violet found herself recounting the entire day, the sabotage, Finn's visit, his cruel words about their relationship. Griffin listened without interruption, his jaw tightening when she repeated Finn's implications about their age difference. He's wrong, Griffin said finally, his voice quiet but fierce.
About all of it. Is he?
The question escaped before she could stop it.
What if he's right, Griffin? What if this is just some midlife crisis? What if you do get tired of me?
Griffin turned to face her fully, his gray eyes intense.
Look at me, Violet. Really look at me.
She met his gaze, seeing the raw honesty burning there, the fierce determination that had built an empire from nothing. I have never wanted anything the way I want you, he said, his voice low and urgent.
Not success, not money, not recognition. Nothing has ever mattered to me the way you matter. Do you think I would risk everything I built, everything I am, for some passing fascination?
His hands found hers, gripping them tightly. I don't want a girl who looks up to me with starry eyes and no opinions of her own. I don't want someone who needs me to be smaller so she can feel bigger.
I want a queen, Violet.
I want someone whose strength makes me stronger, whose intelligence challenges me to be better.
But what about children?
The words tore from her throat.
What about? What about them?
Griffin's voice was gentle but unwavering. I've spent my entire adult life building something meaningful because I had no family to build it for.
If we decide we want children, there are ways.
If we decide we don't, then we build our legacy differently. But I will not let hypothetical futures destroy what we have right now. Violet searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt, any hint that Finn's words had planted seeds of uncertainty. She found only absolute conviction. I'm scared, she whispered.
I've never needed someone like this before.
It terrifies me.
Good, Griffin said fiercely. Be terrified. Be vulnerable. Be human.
But don't you dare let fear make you throw away the best thing that's ever happened to either of us. His words broke something open inside her chest, all the walls she'd built around her heart crumbling at once. Without thinking, without planning, she launched herself into his arms, kissing him with desperate hunger. Griffin caught her against him, his response immediate and overwhelming. This kiss was different from their gentle explorations of the past weeks. This was fire and need and years of loneliness being burned away in the heat of connection. Violet, Griffin groaned against her mouth, his hands tangling in her hair.
God, the way you make me feel.
She pulled back just enough to look at him, seeing her own desperate need reflected in his eyes. I can't think when you're touching me, she admitted breathlessly. Then don't think, he whispered, his thumb tracing her swollen lips.
For once in your life, just feel. Just be.
The permission he offered, the safety she felt in his arms, finally pushed her past the point of rational thought. Take me upstairs, she whispered.
Please.
Griffin went very still, his eyes searching hers.
Violet, are you sure?
I don't want you making decisions because you're upset or scared. I'm making this decision because I'm tired of being scared, she said, her voice stronger now.
Because I trust you. Because I want to be yours completely.
The reverence that crossed his features made her breath catch. He stood slowly, extending his hand to her.
Are you absolutely certain?
Instead of answering with words, Violet placed her hand in his, letting him lead her up the stairs to his bedroom. The space was as beautifully designed as the rest of the house, clean lines, natural materials, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. But Violet only had eyes for Griffin as he turned to face her, his expression tender and hungry in equal measure. I want to worship you, he said softly, his hands framing her face. I want to show you how precious you are to me. Then show me, she whispered. What followed was a symphony of gentle touches and whispered devotions. Griffin undressed her slowly, reverently, pressing kisses to every inch of skin he revealed. He told her she was beautiful, perfect, everything he'd ever wanted. He showed her what it meant to be cherished, to be the center of someone's universe. Violet had never experienced anything like the tenderness Griffin showed her, the way he made love to her as if she were something sacred. He took his time, learning every curve and hollow of her body, discovering what made her gasp and tremble and cry out his name. When she finally fell apart in his arms, it wasn't just physical release, it was the complete surrender of every wall she'd built around her heart. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be truly vulnerable, truly known, truly loved. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the windows, Griffin traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. How do you feel? He asked softly. Violet considered the question, marveling at the peace that had settled over her. Different, she said finally. Like I'd been holding my breath and I can finally breathe. Griffin pressed a kiss to her temple. I love you, Violet Clark. All of you. Your strength, your brilliance, your vulnerability, your age, your experience, everything that makes you who you are. Tears pricked at her eyes, but these were tears of joy, of relief, of finally being seen and loved exactly as she was. I love you too, she whispered. God help me, I love you too. As they fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, Violet finally understood that some risks were worth taking, that some connections transcended logic and convention. Griffin Hammond had seen past her armor to the woman beneath, and in doing so, he'd given her the greatest gift of all, the courage to be completely, authentically herself. Have you ever been so scared of losing yourself in someone that you pushed them away? Sometimes the heart knows what the mind refuses to accept. Share your story of fighting love in the comments. But even as Violet drifted off to sleep, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered warnings about what would happen when the outside world discovered their relationship. Chapter 5. The next morning, Violet woke in Griffin's arms feeling transformed. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting everything in golden hues, and for the first time in years, she felt completely at peace. Griffin's arm was draped protectively around her waist, his breathing deep and even against her neck. She turned carefully in his embrace, studying his sleeping face. Without the intensity of his waking expression, he looked younger, more vulnerable, and her heart clenched with the depth of her feelings for him. How had she ever thought their age difference mattered? This man had seen straight to her soul and loved what he found there. Griffin's eyes fluttered open, and when he saw her watching him, his smile was radiant. Good morning, beautiful, he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. Good morning. She touched his face gently, marveling at her freedom to do so. How did you sleep? Best sleep of my life, he said, pulling her closer. I have the woman I love in my arms. How could I sleep anything but perfectly? The casual declaration of love, spoken so easily in the morning light, made her heart race. Griffin. I know it's fast, he said, reading her expression. I know it doesn't make logical sense. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Before Violet could respond, both their phones began buzzing insistently. Griffin groaned, reaching for his phone on the nightstand. Todd, he answered, his arms still wrapped around Violet. This better be an emergency. Violet could hear Todd's voice, urgent and strained, though she couldn't make out the words. Griffin's expression grew serious as he listened.
What do you mean it's all over the internet? Griffin sat up, running his hand through his hair. How is that possible? Ice flooded Violet's veins.
She grabbed her own phone, seeing 17 missed calls from Helena and a series of increasingly frantic text messages. The first series of articles hit her like a physical blow: tech billionaire's cougar romance, Griffin Hammond's midlife crisis affair with older PR executive, May December scandal rocks corporate world, desperate executive's boy-toy affair. Her hand shook as she scrolled through the accompanying photos, pictures of them at the restaurant, leaving the conference together, even one grainy shot of them kissing outside her apartment. Someone had been watching them, waiting, documenting their relationship for maximum damage.
Violet.
Griffin's voice was gentle but urgent.
Look at me. She couldn't.
Her eyes were fixed on her phone, on the vicious comments already flooding the articles.
Desperate older woman clinging to youth. Sugar mama buying herself a boy toy. Professional reputation in ruins.
This is a disaster, she whispered, the words barely audible. My career, my reputation, everything I've built. Griffin moved to kneel in front of her, taking her face in his hands and forcing her to meet his eyes.
We'll handle this. Together, I won't let them destroy you for loving me.
You don't understand, she said, panic rising in her throat.
This isn't just gossip, Griffin. This destroys everything I've built.
My clients will question my judgment, my competitors will use this against me, my own firm. Violet was already pulling away, the walls slamming back into place around her heart. The shame, the judgment, the professional suicide she'd just committed, it all came crashing down at once.
Her phone rang. James Morrison's name appeared on the screen, and Violet's stomach dropped.
I have to take this, I have to go, she said, her voice hollow, not meeting his eyes. I have to handle this crisis before it gets worse. Violet, please. But she was already gone, fleeing from the scene of her surrender, leaving Griffin alone with the wreckage of what had been, for one perfect night, everything she'd ever wanted.
Violet. Morrison's voice was grim. We need to talk. Now.
2 hours later, Violet sat in Morrison's office feeling like she was facing a firing squad. The senior partners of the firm were arrayed around the conference table, their expressions ranging from disappointed to furious. Explain to me, Morrison said, his voice carefully controlled, how pictures of you in a compromising position with a client ended up on every gossip blog in the city. Griffin Hammond isn't a client, Violet said quietly. We've never done business together.
That's not the point, and you know it. Margaret Caldwell, the firm's managing partner, leaned forward. The point is that you've brought scandal to this firm. Our reputation is built on discretion and professionalism. This makes us look like amateurs.
My personal life has never interfered with my professional performance, Violet said, struggling to keep her voice steady.
Until now, Morrison replied. Bancroft Industries called this morning.
They're citing concerns about judgment and discretion as additional reasons for pulling their business. 3 other clients have requested meetings to discuss the stability of their representation. Each word hit Violet like a blow. Everything she'd built, everything she'd sacrificed for, was crumbling because she dared to find love.
I need you to take a leave of absence, Morrison said finally.
Until this dies down.
You're suspending me? Violet's voice cracked. James, I've given this firm everything. My entire adult life, every waking hour, every ounce of energy I have. And we appreciate that. But right now, your presence is a liability we can't afford.
Violet felt the last of her composure cracking. 20 years of building her reputation, of proving herself in a male-dominated industry, of sacrificing everything for her career, and it could all be destroyed by daring to love someone younger than herself. She left the office in a haze, Helena trailing behind her with a box of personal items. The walk through the office felt like a funeral march, every colleague avoiding eye contact, whispers following in her wake. Ms. Clark, Helena said softly as they reached the elevator. This isn't the end. This will pass. Will it? Violet's voice was hollow. Or is this exactly what I deserve for thinking I could have it all? By the time Violet reached her apartment, the story had exploded across social media. #CougarGate was trending, accompanied by increasingly vicious commentary about older women who refused to act their age. Her phone had been ringing constantly with calls from reporters, former colleagues, and people who claimed to be friends but clearly just wanted gossip. She'd turned off her phone hours ago, but she could still feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her from all sides. Maybe Finn had been right. Maybe this had all been a terrible mistake. The knock on her door at 10 o'clock that night was soft but insistent. Violet knew without looking that it was Griffin. She could feel his presence even through the solid wood. "Go away," she called, not moving from her position curled on the sofa. "Violet, please. Let me in. There's nothing to say, Griffin. This is over." The silence that followed stretched so long she thought he'd left. Then his voice came again, quieter now, but no less determined. "I'm not leaving until we talk. I'll stand here all night if I have to." Violet closed her eyes, torn between the desperate need to see him and the certainty that being near him would only make everything worse. Finally, against her better judgment, she opened the door. Griffin stood in the hallway looking haggard, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. His eyes held a pain that matched her own, and for a moment they just stared at each other. "May I come in?" he asked softly. Violet stepped aside wordlessly, and Griffin entered her apartment for the first time. He took in the elegant space, all clean lines and expensive furnishings that somehow felt cold despite their beauty. "I'm sorry," he said, turning to face her. "I'm so fucking sorry that loving me has cost you everything." "It's not your fault," Violet said automatically, though part of her blamed him for pursuing her so relentlessly, for making her believe this could work. "Isn't it?" Griffin moved closer, his expression anguished. "I pushed you into this. I wouldn't take no for an answer. I made you believe we could have something real despite every rational reason why we shouldn't." "You didn't make me do anything," Violet said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I made my own choices. Choices I influenced. Choices I convinced you to make." Griffin ran his hands through his hair. "God, Violet, seeing what this has done to you. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe I was too selfish to see that loving you would destroy you." The defeat in his voice broke something inside her chest. This beautiful, passionate man who'd shown her what love could be was blaming himself for her downfall. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't you dare blame yourself for this. The only people responsible for this destruction are the ones who think a woman's worth is determined by her age and the men who couldn't handle my success long before you came along." Griffin looked up at her, hope flickering in his eyes. "Then fight this. Fight with me. Don't let them win." "Win what, Griffin?" Violet's voice broke. "My career is over. My reputation is destroyed. What exactly am I supposed to fight for?" "Us," he said fiercely, closing the distance between them. "Fight for us. Fight for what we have together. What we have together isn't enough." The words exploded from her before she could stop them. "It's not enough to replace everything I've lost. It's not enough to rebuild 20 years of work. It's not enough to." She stopped, horrified by what she'd just said, by the devastation that crossed Griffin's features. "I see," he said quietly. "So that's what I am to you. Not enough." "Griffin, I didn't mean." "You meant exactly what you said." His voice was hollow now, all the fight gone out of him. "I was naive to think love could conquer everything. I was stupid to believe that what we have together could be worth more than your career." He moved toward the door, each step breaking Violet's heart a little more. "Where are you going?" she called after him. Griffin paused at the door, not turning around. "I'm giving you what you really want, Violet. Your life back. Without the complication of loving someone who will never be enough." The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like finality, and Violet collapsed onto her sofa, finally understanding that some mistakes couldn't be undone, some words couldn't be taken back. She'd chosen her career over love, and now she had neither. 3 days passed in a blur of silence and regret.
Violet didn't leave her apartment, didn't answer her phone, didn't check the internet to see if the scandal was dying down.
She existed in a bubble of grief, mourning not just Griffin but the woman she'd been when she was with him, confident, cherished, complete.
On the fourth day, Helena appeared at her door with coffee and determination. "Enough," Helena said, pushing past Violet into the apartment. "This ends now."
"There's nothing to end," Violet said listlessly.
"It's over.
Your relationship with Mr. Hammond is over.
Your career isn't."
Helena set down the coffee and faced Violet with steel in her eyes.
"You have two choices. You can let this destroy you, or you can use it to become stronger." "How can I possibly?"
"By remembering who you are," Helena interrupted.
"You're Violet Clark. You've built an empire from nothing. You've overcome every obstacle in your path.
You don't give up, and you don't let small-minded people determine your worth." Helena's words stirred something in Violet's chest, a flicker of the fire that had driven her to success.
"The gossip will die down," Helena continued. "It always does.
But your talent, your brilliance, your track record, those are permanent.
Morrison and Associates needs you more than you need them. They suspended me, Helena."
"Then we start our own firm. You have enough contacts, enough reputation, enough skill to build something even better."
Helena smiled. "Unless you're planning to let a few nasty articles define the rest of your life."
For the first time in days, Violet felt a spark of hope.
Maybe Helena was right. Maybe this wasn't the end, maybe it was a beginning.
But even as she began to plan her professional comeback, her heart ached for Griffin, for the love she'd thrown away in a moment of panic and pride. Some victories, she was learning, felt an awful lot like defeat.
Chapter 6.
2 weeks after Griffin walked out of her life, Violet stood in the empty office space that would become the headquarters of Clark Strategic Consulting. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the potential in every corner.
Helena was right, she was Violet Clark, and she didn't stay down.
But even as she planned her professional resurrection, Griffin's absence was a constant ache in her chest. She'd tried to convince herself that she'd made the right choice, that protecting her career was worth losing him. But every morning she woke hoping to find a text from him, every evening she fought the urge to call him. "The lease papers are ready for your signature," Helena said, appearing with a stack of documents.
"Are you certain about this location?"
Violet looked around the space again, imagining it filled with her team, buzzing with the energy of building something new.
"I'm certain about everything except one thing." "Mr. Hammond?" Violet's chest tightened at the mention of his name.
"I made a terrible mistake, Helena.
I let fear make me cruel.
I told the man I love that he wasn't enough, when the truth is that I've never felt like more than enough until I was with him."
"So fix it," Helena said simply. "How can I? I destroyed everything between us. He was offering me forever, and I threw it back in his face." Helena set down the papers and faced Violet with that knowing look she'd perfected over 8 years. "You're Violet Clark. When have you ever let impossible stop you from getting what you want?"
Before Violet could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID made her heart stop. Griffin Hammond.
"Answer it," Helena said firmly. "Whatever he has to say, you owe him that much." With trembling fingers, Violet accepted the call. "Griffin." "Violet."
His voice was formal, businesslike, so different from the warmth it had once held when he spoke her name.
"I'm calling about a business proposition."
The words hit her like a physical blow. After everything they'd shared, he was reducing their connection to business.
"I see.
I'm sure you've heard that Morrison and Associates lost the Marwood account this morning."
Violet's eyebrows rose.
She hadn't heard, she'd been avoiding industry news to focus on her new venture. Finn Sullivan made some serious miscalculations in their crisis management strategy, Griffin continued.
"Marwood Industries is looking for new representation. I recommended you. Why would you do that?"
The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotion. When Griffin finally spoke, his voice was softer.
"Because you're the best at what you do." Because brilliance deserves recognition, regardless of personal circumstances. Griffin. She wanted to say so much, to apologize, to explain, to beg him to give her another chance. But this businesslike Griffin was a stranger, and she didn't know how to reach the man who'd once held her while she fell apart. The Marwood CEO wants to meet tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I'll send the details. His voice turned formal again. This is purely professional, Violet. I thought you should know that your work speaks for itself, regardless of any complications. The call ended before she could respond, leaving Violet staring at her phone with her heart breaking all over again. Griffin was still protecting her, still believing in her professional worth, even after she'd crushed his heart. How had she ever convinced herself that this man wasn't enough? The meeting with Marwood Industries went better than Violet had dared hope. Within an hour, she had a contract that would make Clark Strategic Consulting profitable from day one. But even as she celebrated this professional victory, her personal life felt hollow. That evening, alone in her apartment, Violet made a decision that terrified her more than any boardroom confrontation ever had. She was going to fight for Griffin Hammond, and she was going to risk everything to do it. She started with a text, "Thank you for the Marwood referral. Can we talk? I have things I need to say." His response came quickly, "I don't think that's wise. Please, Griffin. Give me one chance to explain." Time stretched for so long she thought he wouldn't respond. Then, my office. Tomorrow. 7 p.m. Violet spent the next day in a state of nervous energy, practicing speeches and discarding them, trying to find the words to undo the damage she'd done. By the time she arrived at Griffin's office building, her palms were sweating, and her heart was racing like she was facing the most important presentation of her life. Because she was. The security guard directed her to the 45th floor, where Griffin's assistant, a young man with kind eyes, showed her to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Mr. Hammond will be with you shortly," he said, closing the door behind him. Violet stood at the windows, looking out at the city lights that had once seemed like scattered diamonds when she was in Griffin's arms. Now they just looked cold and distant, like everything else in her life without him. The door opened behind her, and she turned to see Griffin enter. He was immaculately dressed as always, but there was something different about him, a distance, a guardedness that had never been there before. This was the man the business world knew, not the tender, passionate lover who'd worshipped her body and soul. "Violet," he said formally, not coming any closer than necessary. "You said you had things to explain." She'd prepared a speech, logical arguments about why they belonged together, rational explanations for her behavior. But looking at him now, seeing the pain he was trying so hard to hide, all her prepared words fled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "God, Griffin, I'm so sorry. I was scared, and I hurt you." Griffin stayed by the door. Something flickered in his eyes, but his expression remained carefully neutral. Scared of what? Of needing someone. Of being that woman who loses herself in a man. She took a shaky breath. "Turns out losing you was worse. You didn't just hurt me, Violet. You made me feel like I was asking for too much by wanting to love you." Griffin's facade cracked slightly, but he didn't move from his position by the door. "You were protecting your career. I understand that now. It was unrealistic of me to expect you to choose love over everything you'd built." "But that's just it," Violet said desperately. "I didn't choose my career over love. I chose fear over love. I chose the familiar pain of being alone over the terrifying joy of being with you." She took a step toward him, encouraged when he didn't back away. "I spent so many years building walls around my heart that when you offered to tear them down, I panicked. I convinced myself that loving you was weakness, that needing you was failure. And now?" Griffin's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the hope he was trying to suppress. "Now I know that loving you is the strongest thing I've ever done. That needing you doesn't make me weak, it makes me human." Violet's voice broke slightly. "I know that age is just numbers, but chemistry is forever. I know that you saw past my armor to the woman underneath and loved both versions of me. Griffin's professional mask was slipping, revealing the pain and longing underneath.
Violet. I know that I'd rather have one day of being truly loved by you than a lifetime of being alone with my success. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't care. I know that you're not just enough, Griffin, you're everything. You're my heart walking around outside my body. You're the home I never thought I'd find. Griffin stared at her for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. Then, suddenly, he was moving, crossing the room in 3 quick strides and pulling her into his arms. Violet, he whispered against her hair, his voice rough with emotion. I've been dying without you. Every day, every hour, every breath has been agony. I'm sorry, she sobbed against his chest. I'm so sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I was too scared to fight for us. You're fighting now, he said, pulling back to cup her face in his hands. You're here now. That's all that matters. He kissed her then, desperate and hungry and full of all the emotion they'd both been holding back. Violet melted into him, into the promise of forgiveness and second chances. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you so much it terrifies me, but I'm done running from it. I'm done running from you. I love you too, Griffin said, his voice rough with relief. But we need to do this right this time. No hiding, no running. What are you saying? I'm saying we face this together. The gossip, the judgment, all of it. I'm saying I want to build something real with you, not just steal moments when no one's watching. Violet felt tears prick her eyes. That could cost us both everything. Or it could give us everything that matters. 6 months later, Violet stood before the mirror in her new office, adjusting her jacket before the press conference. Clark Strategic Consulting had not only survived the scandal but had thrived because of her transparency about choosing love over fear. Ready? Griffin asked from the doorway, looking devastatingly handsome in his navy suit. Ready. She turned to face him, no longer caring who might see the love in her eyes. Let's show them what partnership looks like. As they walked toward the cameras together, Violet realized this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. They had work to do, battles to fight, a future to build. But they would do it together, openly, without apology. Violet and Griffin proved that when souls connect, nothing else matters. Have you ever found love that made you forget all your rules? Share your unexpected love story in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, smash the like button and subscribe for tomorrow's passionate new tale. Hit the bell so you never miss a Dear Love Diaries story that reminds us all that love conquers every obstacle when 2 hearts are brave enough to fight for it together.